Alright, so the three saddest movies I have ever seen in my life are The Cure, My Dog Skip, and We Bought a Zoo. Oh, and Toy Story 3.
A soliloquy for every movie. For Casablanca, Tommy Boy. He's here, it's him. It's Andrew Toy. It's Andrew Toy.
There are great endings. There are emotional endings. And then there's Toy Story 3. A movie so emotionally devastating that entire theaters of men were bawling their eyes out at the plight of animated toys. Myself included. And this isn't like The Notebook or some Nicholas Sparks movie. This is a movie where every tear shed was absolutely earned. Toy Story 3 is one of the greatest conclusions in cinematic history. One of the reasons is because it completes everything that the first two films were building toward. The three films are so seamless that it's like they had the ending of Toy Story 3 mapped out before they even started making Toy Story. I'm sure there are some people out there that would argue that Star Wars and Marvel should have had the same writing structure. Not me, of course. Yeah, me. Map out all the events before you start a trilogy. Funny how we know that the makers of Toy Story didn't do that. They didn't go into Toy Story expecting to expand on it with many sequels. And yet it turned out to be the perfect trilogy. Toy Story was about friendship. Toy Story 2 was about accepting change. And Toy Story 3 is about letting go. Andy is grown up now. And with that simple reality, the entire trilogy reaches an unavoidable conclusion. Because this entire trilogy has never actually been about toys. The whole time, it's been about childhood. And that's why Toy Story 3 hits so differently than most animated movies. It confronts something that every single person on this world experiences. The painful realization that life moves on, whether or not you're ready for it. The toys spend most of the movie in fear that they've been abandoned. And that fear creates the emotional foundation for the story, leading them to Sunnyside Daycare, which initially looks like paradise. And then Pixar does something brilliant. They flip the concept on its head, and suddenly, Sunnyside Daycare is now a prison being run by Lotso, any of the worst villains you could think of in movie history. Lotso belongs at the top of that list. As far as he knows, as he's still riding in the front of that dump truck, he still thinks he's killed all those toys, and he probably has no regret about it. And what makes Lotso so fascinating is that he's basically Woody if Woody hadn't learned humility in the previous films. He was hurt, replaced, forgotten, but instead of choosing love, he chose bitterness. That contrast is what makes the trilogy feel so interconnected. Every major lesson from the first two films still plays out here. Woody still believes in loyalty. He goes out of his way to save even the smallest people. Buzz still believes in the goodness of others. Jessie still fears abandonment. What I love is that all of these emotional scars that these characters carry with them, they're not just discarded somewhere between part 2 and part 3. They're not forgotten about. They are still present in these toys, and they're built upon. Some of the wounds get stretched wide open, and they have to deal with a whole lot more crap before they can reach a better conclusion than they ever thought possible. That is just masterful storytelling. And then you have the incinerator scene. The infamous incinerator scene, okay? This is by far one of the boldest moments ever put into a family film. In fact, the MPAA came out later and stated that they should have made this rated PG, which was really shocking that they gave it a G rating. I think they were just keeping in line with the first two movies. That is complete irresponsibility, okay? If I were a 5-year-old going into this movie, this would have traumatized the hell out of me. And in fact, if you want to see me complain more about the MPAA and their lousy decision-making, check this video out right here, where I go really deep into it. But in that incinerator scene, they accept death together. We essentially see how they act moments before death. This isn't like, oh, I'm hanging off the cliff and somebody's going to pull me up. This isn't, oh, the bomb may or may not go off. This is literally facing the gates of hell. And there's no way out whatsoever, except for the brilliant ex machina that they pull. And Pixar earned the right to do that because they know the rules so well that some of them they could actually break. But you watch their faces as they contemplate and realize that they are about to be incinerated. And so they hold hands in silence. No jokes. Panicking would do absolutely nothing to save them. They can't avoid it because it's staring them right in the face. It's just acceptance. That scene works so well because it earns it emotionally after 15 years of flawless storytelling. And then comes the very ending, where Andy gives his toys over to Bonnie, passes them on to the next generation. This is a scene that broke me hard. I couldn't see most of the scene because my eyes were so drenched with tears. My wife and I, we were newly married. She turned to me and said, "Are you okay?" Like, she was genuinely concerned for my well-being. But I didn't feel bad because I heard sniffling and crying everywhere in that theater. And this ending has got to be the single greatest ending Pixar has ever come up with. In fact, probably what any movie has come up with. Because Andy does what Woody finally learned back in part 2. Love sometimes means letting go. And it's in this scene here that Woody finally understands his purpose completely. It was never about being Andy's favorite forever. It was about being there for Andy in the times that he needed him the most. That's why Toy Story 3 transcends animation entirely. Very few trilogies stick the ending this perfectly. Outside of Toy Story 3, it's practically unheard of. That's what makes this so incredible, is that each movie stands alone. Without having to rely on the other as a crutch, they can each be taken one at a time and be a complete and fulfilling meal, a feast to the eyes and to the heart. But when you put all three of them together, it's just more than we deserve. And together, they complete one emotional journey of life itself. Especially if you're in your late 30s or early 40s, you're especially going to feel the punch here, because we all essentially grew up with Andy. I think the Bible verse that fits Toy Story 3 perfectly is Ecclesiastes 3:1. It says, "To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under the heavens." But another great verse captures Woody's final act. I want to share that with you too. John 15:13. "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." You'll remember that that's what Jesus spoke during the Last Supper the night before he was betrayed. By the time Woody learned true humility in the first movie, he spent the rest of the series serving others instead of himself. And in the end, he gives Andy one final goodbye. Not for Woody's happiness, but for Andy's future. That's why Toy Story 3 leaves such an emotional impact. Because deep down, everybody watching this movie knows instinctively what this movie is about. That childhood isn't forever. One of the hardest things about being a dad is going through old photographs and seeing just how quickly your kids have grown and changed. Every parent experiences the death of their children several times throughout their life. I'm never going to hold my daughter again and bounce her on my knee and pat her on the back to get her the burp. If I did that, she'd be really upset with me. I'm never going to have to change my son's diapers again. I'm never going to do the whole airplane thing with the spoon. Those days are over. Those toddlers that I knew and grew so much to love, they're gone. There's just a little bit of them left in each stage of my children's lives. So two things can get me crying harder than a funeral: watching Toy Story 3 and looking back at old pictures of my kids. And it's not so much that, oh, they used to be so young and cute, but it's more of, I'm never going to see those toddlers again. That's a difficult lesson to learn, and one I think none of us will ever figure out. But I do believe that the love we receive and the love we give during those times is what shapes us for days to come. Thank you so much for watching. Only if you liked this video would I ask you to press the like button. Please subscribe. That'll help me, my channel. It'll also help you, because then you'll see more of my videos show up on your feed. Until the next time, I'll see you in the next video. Especially if you're in your early 40s especially if you're in your early 40s or late 30s, especially if you're in your late 30s. Can't say it. I can't. Especially if you're in your... I just tried to do it again and it didn't work. Wow, 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 wow. Wow, 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 wow. Peter Piper, Peter Pickle, Peter Pickle, Peter Pickle, Peter Pickle,